Okay, everyone, good morning. How are you? Good. New classroom. What do you think? What's that? Sounds like body. Okay. Oh, you've been in this classroom before? Okay. Yeah, I've never even been. I'm usually in the big lecture hall on the second floor. I've never even been on the third floor, I don't think. But new nonetheless. Hey, remember human beings love familiarity. So coming into this new environment, you're experiencing some new things, trying to figure out what's most comfortable for you. You probably have changed seats next class in some way for whatever reason. All attributed to what? And we say, hey, we are constantly developing. You all haven't completed your prefrontal cortex development, right? You're still going through stages of development. With that being said, we can track some of your motives, intentions, behind your behaviors. Back to what we're talking about here, discussing of toddlerhood and childhood, how you were nurtured, and how it plays a significant role in who you are today. Trying to trace things back so that we can either sort of cope, moderate these sort of maladaptive behavior. We say, hey, everything is used for survival skills is for adaptation, so they're able to survive in different environments. Maladaptive, what means that behaviors that are not well suited for your adaptability, things that kind of hold you back, regress. So, as we continue talking about this subject here, socio emotional, right, let's try to ponder on self. Because here we're going to address things like self esteem, how one values themselves. How do you see yourself? How do you perceive yourself in the world and around others? Your self concept. How do you sort of create a self identity for yourself? Your awareness. How aware are you of yourself and others? How well are you of your behavior, emotions? Emotional regulation. How are you able to manage how you feel? When we say later on, we can describe these things as personality traits, but you usually will do that at maybe when we get to the area around your late teens, where you truly start to develop a sense of a personality. We say, hey, the human body is composed of two systems that react to stimulation and that brings back down that stimulation. And if we are not able to moderate those systems based on our impression, how our mind thinks about things in the world, we will inevitably will have stress and anxiety. We will have a range of hormones pumping through our body that may create these maladaptive behaviors. So here we're learning about how do you react to particular stimuli, right? As a toddler, and how was your parents' methods? Because we say your caregiver is using methods that will inevitably impact you, right? Unless by chance there are certain predispositions you have of genetics that make you extremely resilient, irregardless of how you were raised. But what we find is usually not the case. Essentially, we could think of ourselves as gigantic children. We just have really big egos, which creates the self concepts that we've distanced ourselves from our childhood. We don't think it matters that much. Here we're learning that it does. All right, so just brief overview. So we talked about Erison. We said developmental tasks. Hey, in this stage, as in every stage that we're going to talk about, there's a crisis. There are points which you should progress and conquer a task. The task may be things with emotional regulation, being able to respond appropriately, right? Is mom allowing you the ability to respond how we would normally respond to a smile? What is the environment like? Is it lots of noises? Is it angry parents, right? Is it hostility? All these things will create uh, maladaptive behaviors for a crisis. Trust versus mistrust. If we can't trust, Moving on to the next stage is an extreme challenge. We will inevitably regress. So we may see some toddlers or even children for that matter of saying, like, oh, wow, they're behind. They're behind how? They're behind socially and emotionally. What do you mean? They can't be placed in an environment with other toddlers, other children, because they are aggressive. They hit for no reason. You're like, where does that come from? Why wasn't that instructed by the parents? Host of reasons. Parents busy, don't care, mom's depressed, right? Dad's not present or dad works too much. A host of reasons that may be, reasonable in some sense, or maybe unreasonable, right? Maybe just bad parenting skills. And then we say autonomy versus shame and doubt. We have to be independent. Your mom's not in the classroom with you. Your parents are not here, which means that you have achieved autonomy in a sense, because you still depend on your parents, probably for the most part, right? Still probably live at home. They still probably pay for everything that you do, right? They still support you. You have yet to achieve this self determination of just being out in the world and kind of doing everything on your own. Some more than others. You're like, hey, there are some people I know that, hey, they're paying for school. They live in their own apartment already. Maybe they even bought a condo or something, right? Maybe they got perfect credit score. All these different things. You're like, where does that come from? How are they nurtured, right? How are they moderated by the parents? We'll talk about that. Trust in caregivers. So we say, hey, you can't move on unless you complete a certain of those developmental tasks, right? Lasting effect. Mom was too overbearing, right? Overbearing. Mom sort of picked up all the pieces for me whenever things did bad. So now as I move through life or try to get to the next stage of development, I can't without her presence, because her presence is soothing to my problem solving abilities. Without her presence, as we saw with those rhesus monkeys, without the presence of cloth mom, I don't have a source to go to comfort myself. So why do we need so much comforting? Well, even in this class, we're going to tap our legs, touch our face, rub our hair, look at our phones. Like, what are we doing? Probably not looking at nothing much, right? Could be TikTok or anything. We're self-soothing. So we are essentially going back to cloth mom all the time throughout our daily lives so that we can come back to some equilibrium to move on. You may be like, hey, some of the lectures in the university are boring, right? And we say, hey, boring is anxiety. Boring creates a sense of something needs to be done. It's anxiousness. If you're bored, you're going to react in some physiological way. And anxiousness brings up what we say, that sympathetic system, right? Heart rate goes up, mind starts to sort of be neurotic, thinking about all sorts of things, daydreaming. We're like, how do you come back down, right? You have to learn how to moderate, how to come back down. So it has real physiological consequences. All right. Facial expressions, right? We say, hey, adaptive behaviors, things that exhibit normality in how we respond. Um, Parents need to look at their babies, show them smile, show them laughter, and if the baby responds, respond appropriately. Give positive reinforcement to say, this is good, this is what should be done in terms of your facial expressions. Other things, if we start to notice, hey, baby doesn't really react. What could we do about that? If baby's not reacting to a smile, baby's not stimulated in some way, right? We have to change things up. Maybe we introduce toys, we introduce things that are characters somewhere, something to stimulate so we can start to gain more expressions. Okay. All right, early biological effects to early trauma, right? Differing reactions, affects caregiving environment. So social interaction is related to your environment, right? Um, you should be provided some sort of obstacles in your environment by your caregivers in order for you to problem solve on how to deal with challenges in life, right? If not, we're talking about here the biological effects would be that you have emotional regularity and you can have outbursts. You're easily triggered. Those who are easily triggered can't manage their emotional responses to basic replies from the outside world. All right, think of the environment we live in now. People are highly triggered. Highly triggered by what? By words, phrases, ideas, concepts, right? Was that facilitated in these stages of rearing, or is that something just new that came out the woodworks to make people so emotionally sensitive, right? Their impression and their temperament towards certain things out in the environment. All right, I think we talked about culture last time. But here, hey, culture is highly impactful. Here in the United States, we're individualized. Places in the Far East, we say they are collectivist societies. Collectivist societies usually rear their children to not emotionally express what they're feeling or thinking as much as we do, right? Here we're kind of giving the narrative that you are a self. You are a individual with an ego, and you should fully express everything. So we say things concisely here in the US. We speak in concise terms. We believe in clarity, right? We don't believe in abstract language or very small phrases for us to kind of guess, like, hey, what does that actually mean? In other cultures, you say language is not as robust in terms of everyday speak, in terms of conversations. That comes from the rearing of the children. You know, you're like, well, what's the positive benefits of that? What could be some positive benefits of not allowing the infants to emotionally express as much as we do here in the US? To express everything, right? Talk out everything. Tell me how you feel, right? What do you think? Pros, cons? What's the benefits of it? Right? You say, well, you know what? It allows for maybe more contemplative mind frame. It allows for maybe to internalize before you speak. In other parts of the world, even in my own experience, I noticed that people think before they speak. They give it a pause. They really think on it. They're slow to speak. They're careful with their words and they don't have to use much, right? Here, well, what's the benefit of that? You're like, well, internalizing your thoughts, maybe you're thinking about thinking, which is a very good practice. What we call in psychology, meta thinking. Are you able to think about thinking so that before you actually react or respond to anything, what's being asked of you, what's going on in the environment, you're able to kind of do like a self analysis. Now, here in the US, we say, hey, you know what, we're quick to our speech. So maybe if we were to say something that could possibly be triggering, people will immediately respond without even thinking about their responses. Right? We say different in parenting styles that maybe lend itself to that behavior. What are the pros of that? What could be the benefits of that? Teaching just how to quickly express. What do you think? Right? Maybe we under the theory that, hey, that's authentic response. Maybe your emotions do matter. And maybe your first reaction is your best reaction, right? And maybe in other places of the world, that's not the sort of theory on how you should react to the environment. Maybe emotions shouldn't matter so much. But we say, hey, there's a difference. collectivist, individualistic. Uh, they in the Far East, you would say, hey, it's not as important to express because you're not that important as an individual. You're part of a family, you're part of a group, part of a society, and the group is more important than you. So maybe you should kind of internalize more without having emotional expression because really you're going to take down the group. We don't find it to be that important. That could be a positive thing for certain cultures. If you're raised that way and the culture is fine, then it works. Right? Here we say that's not the case. The group is not more powerful than the individual. The individual is more powerful than the group. What we've come to find in research is those who tend to internalize, although we make it classify them as like, hey, they were raised to be introverts. Do we find that they're less stressful? What do you think? What do you think the research suggests? The people who are introverted appear to be stoic, contemplative, reflective, not quick to speak. Yeah. What do you think? Have they been found to be under less stress or more stress? Yes.
I feel like they don't realize they're under as much stress until it like boils over. Since they're not like quick to act or anything, it kind of just builds up, and then it all releases. And you're like, oh, there's a lot going on in there.
Yeah, absolutely. We say, hey, you know what? It's energy, right? Mental and psychic energy. And if it's not given out, if it's not expressed out to the world, then it does build up over time. Too much thoughts and energy being built up. As opposed to, say, the extrovert, right? Their anxiety is internalizing. They don't want to internalize too much, right? So their anxiety is being alone, right? They get all of their sort of energy out by being part of a group, right? That's cool. Temperament, right? What is temperament? How would you describe temperament? Yes. Part of personality, right? But what do you think? If someone says, hey, you have a particular type of temperament, right? Right? Temperament is really how you respond to the environment, right? How sensitive and quick do you respond, right? So that's your temperament. You could be moody. How do you respond? You may respond in a negative way. You're always moody, right? Moody temperament. It could be aggressive, right? Standoffish, all sorts of things. We say that, hey, temperament is also built through nurturing by caregivers at this stage, right? Because it's facilitated by the parents on how the toddler or the infant should react based on feedback from the parents. Goodness of fit. So, goodness of fit is compared to temperament versus environment, right? Meaning that if a child does have a predisposition to be very joyful, excited, stimulated, and the environment that mom or caregiver or dad presents is more slow paced, right? More stoic, less stimulated, then there's going to be not a goodness of fit. There's going to be a conflict there, right? Also because of parental temperament. So if baby is joyful, happy, and mom or caregiver happens to be de- facing depression or moody, there's going to also be a disconnect as well too, right? Essentially, the child will be confused. So they wouldn't be able to emotionally regulate themselves as easy because they're observing mom as being moody or depressed and they're happy and joyful. So they're kind of taught to suppress their feelings, right? To hold their feelings in because that's what their environment presents to them. All right, and then attachment. We saw attachment with the Harlow experiment on the rhesus monkeys. right? What we observed there was, hey, if you enter a new environment with mom, right? Mom is present. We saw the cloth mom and we saw the mom with the food and the water. Um, how close do you stay to mom in that environment? Are you on her the entire time you enter this new environment? Because the new environment is a new task, right? It's a new thing to be conquered. It's something to evolve and adapt to, right? And so if mom is present, are you clinging to her all the time? So we say, well, that's sort of overbearing. So you have some sort of dysregulation in terms of attachment to your parent, right? If we see that the baby or the monkey leaves mom very quickly and begins to explore, we'll say, like, well, that seems to be very healthy in a sense. Because as an adult, you would also need to explore new environments in order to adapt without having parental presence. Different styles, though. We could say, hey, mom is a grown up who can leave the room, who can come back. Maybe there's strangers that come into the room. What are going to be the responses with the baby there, too? All that will affect attachment, right? So, different sorts of attachments we'll learn here. All right, so we say, hey, behavior signals, right? How is the anxiety of the child when mom is not present? Is child extremely anxious, right? Looking for mom? We like, hey, that's not going to be a good, healthy development signal for behavior. Is the child going to be able exploratory and maybe don't care about mom? Maybe the child completely forgets about mom. We're like that individual or would be more of an avoidance style of attachment, right? No, you really don't need anybody. Maybe too independent, over independent, not able to work in groups. I have a video here that to look at. All right. Okay, well, back to self awareness. Before we watch this video, we're talking about self awareness, how important that is. We saw that there was something called the Rouge test that we can measure self awareness by in toddlers, in which case we place a red dot on their nose, we put them in front of a mirror, and we begin to observe the responses. We'll say a healthy response is the ability to know that that's not actually you in the mirror, but it's just a reflection, right? So are you touching the red dot on the mirror, or are you touching your physical nose in real life? Are you responding appropriately to your reflection? If you are smiling in the mirror, will you continue to smile and laugh and be playful with your own sort of self concept? So let's take a look at the Rouge test. A mark is placed on his forehead. Hang on. The baby. Where's the baby? Usually a baby young. Do that in the mirror. This is known as a mirror self-recognition test, which may offer clues about the development of self-awareness. Without alerting the child, a mark is placed on his forehead. The baby. The baby. Usually, a baby younger than about 18 months doesn't make the connection between itself and the person in the mirror. The child may even look behind the mirror for the stranger it sees. Hi. Hi. But by about 18 months, there's a change in the child's awareness. Now it notices the red dot and the link between itself and the image in the mirror. What's not red? My
next few years, children go on to fulfill their human birthright, constructing an increasingly sophisticated sense of self. They will have a rich and complex life of the mind, and a sense of being the central characters in their own dramas.
All right, how important is self awareness? What happens if you haven't developed appropriately, even with the mirror test? What do you think could be some of the results of a lack of self awareness? Lack of self awareness. What could be some of the results? Yes. In what way? Why won't you be able to control self?
You don't see yourself as your own person. You'll always be responding to everyone else, and you'll never be able to make a conscious decision.
Yeah. You say, hey, self awareness involves consciousness. If you're not conscious of your own self in both a mental way and a physical way, right? Your own sort of physical control over your body. A lot of issues. Like there could be even physical issues, things you can't control physically, right? Sexual impulses, the ability to go to the restroom on your by yourself, right? Appropriately, things of that nature. Spatial awareness, right? Spatial orientation, not being able to navigate yourself in a way because you have no concept of self. You're not consciously aware. Here's our second video.
So the researchers wondered, why would the baby human who
Right, and so we saw earlier in the previous video that self-awareness kind of comes around maybe 12 months to 18 months, but it really is not fully developed till almost 2 years of age. And we'll see that here in terms of looking at scale, how we picture things in the world based on
at Judy
scalability.
DeLoach's lab at the University of Virginia, while studying children's understanding of scale, researchers discovered a very surprising phenomenon involving self-awareness, a crucial step toward becoming a social being. All right. 2.5-year-old Madeline is invited to play in a room full of large toys. At this age, she already has a sense of herself and would have passed the shopping cart test with flying colors. She's given hands-on experience with each toy in the room. Researchers wanted to know what the baby human would do if they replaced these life-size toys with perfect miniature replicas. How would they physically relate to them? Madeline notices that there is something different about the room now. Why don't you pretend like it's a big one and you can get in and take it for a ride? But that doesn't stop her from treating the toys as if nothing had changed. Ignoring the size of the car, she proceeds to try and get into it. That's a good idea. So push it in as far as it goes. Many other 2.5-year-old children tested responded in the same way as Madeline did. They did not modify their behavior with the toys, even though they could see that they were smaller. So the researchers wondered, why would the baby human, who by the age of 2.5 has a sense of themselves and their own bodies, ever relate to the miniatures as if they were still full-size toys? It seems that the baby human wants to play with the toys so badly, it can cause them to momentarily disregard the difference between the size of the toy and the size of their own body. It's right here. Judy DeLoach has concluded that at this age, the baby human's sense of scale is so fragile that their emotions can occasionally override their perception of themselves. But their perception of their physical self includes one other major aspect of becoming a social being. And that is gender.
Why did they note gender at the end? What do you think? Why do you think they noted gender? Any ideas?
Women tend to develop mentally faster than men,
Yeah, I mean, yes, females tend to develop social emotionally faster than men. But in terms of gender, we don't really see that happening until maybe like ages 3 to 5, right? Which Freud kind of talked about phallic stages, where you begin to notice that you have genitalia, and if you have, like, say, you take a bath with brothers and sisters, you notice theirs too. You begin to observe yourself, maybe explore yourself. So at this stage, even though there is self-awareness and self-consciousness, even about the differences in space, there's still no gender sort of um, identity there. All right. Next, different styles of attachment, right? Security of attachment, right? Secure attachment. Secure. We say, hey, as human beings, we need to check in. Check in with whom? Check into our mental concept of soothing mom, right? So we reference this. This is not something we think about. This is unconscious behavior. When we're in an environment that is new, that either we're learning something new, we're engaging with others, we can only do that for so long before we have to check in. Remember I said, like, hey, we have these impulses that we do even when we are bored. We have to check in and hit a reset, right? So if it's healthy, we check in time to time. When we're learning something new, we take a break. When we get exhausted, we go do something, right? We relax. We hungry, we satisfy our hunger and thirst at appropriate time, right? That leads to moderation of your emotions. You tend to be a stable person with a good temperament. You're able to get along with people. You're able to form healthy bonds, healthy relationships, right? Which is essential. Next, we have insecure avoidant. Insecure avoidant is, hey, you know what? Mom or dad or whoever was my caregiver didn't respond to me when I needed them. I needed to check in, and there was no one to check in with. They didn't respond to the cries enough. They didn't respond to things that I needed, right? They gave me the food they waited too long. And even when I went out to explore the environment, they were not present. They just let me play and they left, right? Left me all on my own. Secure avoidant. So now I avoid people, right? There was no one there for me to trust that they would be there to securely provide any sort of source of soothing. So now, as I get in a relationship with people or establish relationships with people, they're very loose. I typically avoid people. It's very hard to establish a strong bond, a firm bond, right? Because I don't have that mechanism that was supposed to be given to me. Insecure resistant attachment, right? Shows a mixed pattern of responses to the caregiver, right? We say this is like kind of unstable behavior. You're a parent, you're in and you're out. You're not really stable in your presence. It could be mom or dad in any sense. And this also leads to instability in your relationship forming abilities as an adult. So here you can say, hey, you know what? You're up and down. You're chaotic. Um, you display behaviors where you want to end relationships out of the blue, right? You want to be the person that sort of end ties quickly because you don't have a sense of real trust, right? You're unstable emotionally. You're triggered by all sorts of things. You run away from people, right? You cause drama. You create all sorts of issues in relationships on purpose, right? Because things are disorganized for the most part in your relationship. So, let me, thinking of yourself, what sort of styles of attachment you think that you have in your own relationships, but just with people. It doesn't have to be romantic relationships. If you want to use that as an example, you can. But think about, how do you attach to people? Are you avoidant? Do you do not attach to people? Are you secure? Do you have healthy relationships? Right? Do your relationships tend to be chaotic? And even if you don't want to address yourself, maybe even address your parents. Right? So let's discuss that amongst our groups. Now we got new groups. So let's do 4, 4, 3, 4, 5. Let's be our groups for today. So get in your groups and talk about styles of attachments. How do you feel that you attach? And if so, if you're able to identify, tell me where you think it comes from. Because if you can observe your parents, you could say, my parents, my mom, my dad doesn't have secure attachment. You know, she doesn't form really healthy relationships. We don't have a healthy relationship. Things are disorganized. Things are healthy. Things like that. So discuss that amongst your group. I'll see if I can pull it up on the board so you can see the different styles. All right, maybe you could just address secure and insecure. I won't make it too tricky for you, right? We say insecure, you're kind of avoidant, you're not certain of people, you're not even certain of yourself, right? That's what we call it, insecurity. People who are insecure, not certain of themselves, right? That type of behavior, like person who's insecure needs attention. They're not certain of themselves, right? They need validation. They are insecure. They didn't receive that type of nurturing from the parent, right? Secure what means, hey, people who don't need the validation, people who are okay with being themselves, people who are authentic, people who don't cause drama for no reason because they don't find it necessary, right? People who don't need to have those sort of reactions. So maybe we could just address secure and insecure. What do you think? How do you think you were raised based on maybe current behavior and observation? Everybody's gonna say secure, watch. And if you broke free of the mode, you could say that. Maybe you were raised in an insecure environment, but maybe you are not insecure. Right? And this is not a negative thing. This is just a thing that happens to be how we are. Insecure attachment's not bad because it does provide a lot of motivation to get attention. Think of the people who are YouTubers and Kanye West and those people. You think they had secure attachment? No, but guess what? It worked out. It worked out for them. Right? People who are secure be like, hey, I don't need it. I don't need the fame. I don't need the money. And other people are like, yeah, I do need it. Right? You're like, that's not a bad thing. Maybe it drives motivation in some way. Maybe it could lend credence to your goals and objectives. Even think beyond that. You're like, well, people who have had secure attachments, right? Think of secure attachments, right? You're like, well, secure attachment sort of imbues trust. And you're like, the world's not a place to be trusted, right? So maybe insecure attachment, even in terms of trust, might be adaptive. It might be really beneficial because maybe the world's not a place to be trusted, right? And you've prevented a lot of bad things from happening to yourself by having that behavior. Okay, what do you think? Over here, what do you think? Parenting styles of your parents. How do you think? All right, so how did that happen? If you say, hey, I was raised in a securely attached environment, but in grade school I was insecure. How did that happen? Why grade? All right, but so connecting with people was difficult in grade school, but you're saying it wasn't difficult before that? But okay, when you were young, before grade school, was the secure household, were you allowed to go out and explore environments and see all sorts of walks of life and people and interact with people? Or you're saying, you know what, mom did her best job enclosed in the household, but I wasn't able to really explore different people. And so when I go finally to school and there's different people, new challenges, now I kind of doubt myself. Is that it? Okay. Interesting. What over here, what are you thinking? All right, so you say, hey, you benefited because you're a great observer of what to do and not to do. But what you observed is that everyone's vying here for some sort of attention, and that created sort of insecure. Okay. Great. Anything else? Any impact you feel that that has on forming relationships or maintaining them now or in high school or anything like that? Okay. All right. Good answer. Anyone else? Mm-hmm. Now, but that you're saying that's a result of parenting style. Was mom like always nurturing and there and supportive? There. Okay. Interesting. Over here. What are your thoughts?
I would say like I grew up like pretty secure. Like my parents were there, and like they like helped nurture me into like a very like secure environment. And during school, like I I was very like myself, like very secure in that.
And did you face stress and anxiety with other people when you finally kind of went out into the world?
I would say like a little bit, but I was able to be like myself and
Okay.
like know what I am.
All right. So your secure attachment, at least you have authenticity. You self-aware of who you are and self-concept. Okay. Over here.
Me and Michaela had similar circumstances where we both grew up in a very secure household. Both parents were very supportive, but we both have multiple older siblings who were also like very involved in like sports and like theater and stuff like that. So getting that attention from parents was difficult. So they're always there, but you know, there's only two of them split between multiple kids.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of forms an insecure attachment that way.
Mm-hmm.
For me personally now, my parents are very, very involved because I'm the youngest. So all the other kids, they have their own kids now. I'm the only one who doesn't have any children. So they're very like hands-on with me now. So it kind of reestablished that security.
Okay. So it came back full circle.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but I feel like having siblings definitely plays a role.
Yeah, so right, that's a good point. You're like, hey, in my environment, it wasn't just mom and dad. It was a lot of other people facilitating these attachments. So they help these sort of relationship forming techniques. Okay, over here.
So I grew up in a secure household, um, but the relationship, excuse me, the relationship I have with my sisters and my parents are two different relationships. I'm not saying my parents were bad parents, but with my sisters, I was kind of able to kind of trauma bond with them
Mm-hmm.
about stuff that I couldn't with my parents. So the relationship I have differentiates over time, like between my siblings and my parents. So I would say I am secure because they were good parents, but also like I know what to look for also in friends to see if we're compatible with each other, especially at the age I am now. Like I know what to look for. I'm mature now, almost like observing
Mm-hmm.
to see if we're compatible. And it's fine if we're not, but it depends on how everything works out.
All right, so you have an advantage because once again, you say you had a sister who taught you those things outside of mom and dad, right? So you already knew how to form relationships and deal with things that maybe others who didn't have siblings dealt with. But maybe the relationship with mom and dad might be different. Maybe you look at your sister at a very high level or something, right? You may look at mom and dad in terms of certain ways, maybe different. Back here.
So when you said secure, and personally, like I have three siblings, so one of my parents were around at the time, and my grandma. And we said that our attachment kind of depends on one person. Because there's some people you don't know, so you kind of avoid them.
Mm-hmm.
But like the closer you get to them, obviously starts to get more attached.
Okay. So like more enduring time with people, the more it can get better. I grew up in a very chaotic household, so I would say it was an insecure environment. I'm the youngest out of 13 kids, right? And remember, I said, mom and dad were always doing something. My mom and dad were never married, but I would say, hey, some positive benefits with siblings, just like some of you mentioned. Having so many siblings substituted for mom and dad. And it helped me learn how to deal with different personalities and forming relationships. So, sibling attachment can kind of help these issues. All right, I'll let you get out of here. I'll see you on Friday.